Let me ask you something. Who decided what the American dream was supposed to look like? Think about it for a second. At some point in your life, probably pretty early, you absorbed a very specific picture. 4 walls, a mortgage, a yard, maybe a 2-car garage. The whole Pleasantville white picket fence sort of thing, pre-packaged and pre-approved. And attached to that image was a set of instructions. Go to school, get a job, buy a house, mow the lawn. Now here's what I want you to notice. Nobody voted on that, and nobody asked you. It just appeared in the culture, in the tax code, in the zoning laws, in the way your grandmother talks about your cousin who's still renting. It became the definition of making it. And by extension, if you're not there yet, you haven't made it. Yet. You failed to launch, or some euphemism that infantilizes an adult for conditions they inherited. I want to talk about where that picture comes from, who benefits from it, and why it's been used quietly and effectively, and for decades, to rig the housing system against the majority of Americans. Because here's some context to that pre-approved dream that people just don't talk enough about. 45 million American households are renting right now. Not 45 million people waiting to become homeowners. 45 million households, families and workers, young people, retirees, living their lives, building their future on their own terms. And the system that we built treats every single one of them like they're doing something wrong. I want to start with the baby boomers, because they're the generation that actually got the deal. They were handed the script. And these were, let's remember, the same people who burned their draft cards in the 60s and questioned everything. The counterculture generation, the ones who were going to tear down the establishment. And then mostly, they followed the plan. And for most of them, it worked. Homeownership delivered. They built equity. They built wealth. The American dream as advertised was very real for the baby boomers. They are today the wealthiest generation in American history. 83 trillion in net wealth. More than half of all household wealth in this country is held by this one generation. And still, a third of them opted out of homeownership. 66% of baby boomer renters say they prefer renting. 61% say they are relieved they don't own a home. The wealthiest generation in American history, the most property-owning generation in American history, the generation that actually got the deal everyone else was promised, and a third of them looked at the approved script and said, no thank you. So I want to ask you something. If the people who actually got the American dream as advertised couldn't be sold on it universally, what are we expecting of everybody else? What exactly are we defending? What script are we insisting everyone else follow? Now look at the generations coming up behind them. Gen Z and young millennials, Americans under 35, now represent more than half of all renters in this country. And a lot of them aren't renting because they failed. They're renting because they made a calculation about flexibility, about living near opportunity, about keeping their obligations light enough to go where their life takes them. The more negative story here is that some of them watched their parents get buried in a house they couldn't sell in 2008. They saw what happens when the approved script becomes a trap. They made a different call based upon values they chose. And there are few things more American than that. The problem isn't people are renting. The problem is that the system makes it brutal for them when they do. And I want to explain what that brutality actually looks like for some people, because we throw that word around a lot and some people just don't get it. If you're a renter earning less than $30,000 a year, and tens of millions of Americans are, after you pay rent, you got $250 left. $250 per month for everything else. Let's just hold on to that for a minute and think about what that means. Food, transportation, medicine, a car repair, a birthday present for your kid, an emergency fund, a future. All of it, $250 a month. Now here's what that actually means in practice. It means the whole thing is one bad day away from collapsing. The car breaks down, you can't fix it for $250. So you can't get to work, so you'll lose your job across town. Not because you're lazy, not because you made bad decisions, because you had $250 and the car costs $400 to fix. The prescription runs out. You can't fill it this month because something else came up. The parking ticket you can't pay becomes a fine. That fine becomes a warrant. One missed payment turns into a chain of events that takes years to climb out of. And every single link in that chain traces back to the same place. You had $250 and the world cost more than that. You can't plan on $250. and you can't put down roots when the lease ends in 12 months and there's nowhere else to go in your price range. You can't build something when the cost of living in the present goes up faster than your paycheck does. The consequences for this are far wider too. That instability doesn't just strain a budget, it strains a marriage. Financial distress is consistently one of the top predictors of divorce. Study after study, including a meta-analysis of 48 separate research papers, finds that children from divorced homes are roughly twice as likely to end up involved in crime. Researchers call it one of the most consistent findings in the social sciences. Broken homes build a broken society, one family at a time. It strains the decision about whether to have children at all. Young couples aren't always just choosing to wait, they're doing the math and deciding the answer is no. Not yet. When they do try later, biology just doesn't negotiate. Delayed family formation means more infertility, smaller families, and a birth rate that is now at all-time lows. Less than 1.6 children per woman, well below the 2.1 needed to replace one generation with the next. We are a people slowly deciding not to have a future. The downstream of that decision is already visible. Emptying towns, closing schools, a demographic cliff so serious that economists and demographers discuss it in whispers because the honest version of it is too dark to say out loud. Who builds the roads? Who staffs the hospitals? Who funds the retirements? The answer increasingly is there's just not enough people to do all that. This is what's actually being stolen, not square footage, not a down payment, the family that would have been, the town that would have grown. The generation that never arrived because a zoning board made a place to live the first step too expensive to take. Now, you may have heard everything I just said and assumed you know where I'm going politically, and I want to address that directly. I'm not a leftist. I believe the laws of supply and demand are immutable. No amount of political will has ever repealed them, and none ever will. When politicians talk about tenant protection, what they really mean is tenant protection laws, which typically result in violations of contract and property rights, an approach I find deeply repugnant to our traditions and our heritage. And more practically, they don't work. You cannot regulate your way out of a shortage regulation created in the first place. But if what you mean by tenant protection is the voluntary union of tenants to act together, I don't have any problem with that. It's a free country, right? There's a second objection I can already hear. It's something like, nobody should be making $30,000 a year in the first place. Fixed wages, not housing. It's a reasonable instinct. It's also wrong, or at least just incomplete in a way that really matters. In a market where housing supply is strangled by regulation, wage increases don't stay in workers' pockets. Landlords don't set rents based upon what's fair. They set rents based upon what the competitive market can handle. Raise wages without building more housing, and you've handed renters a raise that goes straight to their landlord. We already know this is happening. Harvard's Joint Center for Housing Studies found that cost-burden renting is now climbing deep into $45,000 to $75,000 income range. This isn't a poverty problem. It's a supply problem that just looks like an income problem. You can't earn your way out of a shortage that the government created. Here's the argument some folks on the left just never want to have. They just don't seem to see that the government created this problem. And the government has been perfectly content for decades to let landlords take the blame for it. And let me explain what I mean. The reason your rent isn't affordable isn't primarily because your landlord is greedy. Your landlord operates in a competitive market just like everyone else. If there are 30 units available in your price range, your landlord has to compete for you. He has to maintain the property, answer the phone, treat you like a customer instead of a captive. You can walk away. But if there is no apartments available in your price range, and in most American cities there aren't, your landlord knows it. You have no leverage, no choices. You take what's offered or you sleep in your car. So why aren't there enough apartments? Well, number one, zoning laws that ban anything but single-family houses on most residential land. Number two, minimum lot sizes that make smaller, more affordable homes illegal before anyone even tries to build them. Number three, environmental review processes that turn a straightforward housing project into a decade-long legal war. You got parking minimums, setback requirements, design review boards with the power to kill a project over the color of the exterior paint. Every one of these policies has a constituency that benefits from their existence. Each one of them makes it harder to build. Every one of them keeps supply artificially low, which keeps costs artificially high, which keeps the $250 margin right where it is. The shortage is policy, and the people defending that policy will tell you they're protecting neighborhoods. They're preserving character, saving the environment. What they're actually doing is protecting their property values at the expense of everyone else who doesn't already own. Need more conservative bona fides? How about this? I think the solution is older than the problem. The government-issued version of the American dream gets one thing fundamentally wrong. It assumes somebody has to decide. That a planner, a zoning board, a city council, somebody somewhere in some room has to determine what a neighborhood should look like, how many apartments are too many, how small a house is too small. But what if everybody got to decide? What if builders and buyers and developers and renters and all of America made that determination together through millions of individual choices without a committee in the middle translating their own preferences into policy? The committee's central planners can't do that. Not because they're stupid, but because no committee has ever been able to process the hundreds of millions of individual values, preferences, and the visions of the good life that our free people bring to their housing decisions every single day. The price mechanism does that job. Here's what I mean. When a builder sees rising demand for smaller apartments near a job center and responds by building them, he isn't following a directive. He's responding to what people actually want. When rents rise in one neighborhood and fall in another, that's not cruelty. That's the market communicating reality. Millions of individual decisions about how to live aggregated into a signal called a price mechanism that no planner could ever replicate. Property rights are what make that system work. They give the builder the freedom to respond to what people need and get compensated for it. They give the renter the freedom to choose a new place that better suits their values. Property rights don't pick winners between builders, owners, and renters. They create the conditions under which all of them can be made real, a synergy of incentives that create abundance. This is the actual American dream, not Pleasantville, not government-approved blueprints for a correct life. The freedom to pursue your own version of happiness, your own definition of the good, the true, and the beautiful, without asking permission from anyone. The family that stays rooted in the town their grandparents built, the 24-year-old who keeps his obligations light and spends a year in Southeast Asia before he figures out what he really wants to do. The guy who rents the same apartment for 20 years and turns his hobby into his career. The couple who save every dollar and claw their way to a down payment through sheer stubbornness. All of them are living the dream. All of them deserve a system that works for them. Right now, none of them have one. The housing system we have wasn't built for any of these people. It was built by and for the people already inside it and defended year after year by politicians who mistake the approved script for the American dream itself. The zoning board didn't build this country. Builders did. People who looked at a piece of land and saw what it could become. People who didn't ask permission. They just built. That fire, that instinct is still alive. It just needs oxygen and room to grow again. The land liberty movement exists because the American dream belongs to everyone willing to pursue it, not just the people who pursue it the approved way. We're building a coalition of Americans who understand that housing freedom is life freedom, whether you're buying or renting. That property rights mean more homes, which means more choices, and more choices result in more power in the hands of the people who actually live in those homes. You now know more about what's actually broken than most people in DC do. Don't let that go to waste. Follow us. Share this with someone who needs to hear it. We're done waiting for permission to build. The American dream isn't dead. It's just being blocked. I'm David Rand from the Land Liberty Movement. This is Build the Dream. Let's rebuild the American dream together.